All right, welcome everyone to our Conejo Open Space Foundation Summer Speaker Series. We are so thrilled that everyone has joined us this evening. We are going to talk today about the 2022 Monarch Miracle and learn a little bit about our friendly butterflies. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to present our speaker, and I'll do that in just a moment. First, let me tell you who I am. I am Tanya Garcia. I'm the Vice President for the Conejo Open Space Foundation. I am on the board and very happy to be part of such a small but mighty all volunteer organization. We do lots of great things in your beautiful Conejo Valley. Many of you I know have participated in other speaker series. You've also been volunteers in our activities like Trail Work Days or Education Days. But I know that there's a lot of new faces on the program tonight. So bear with me. I would like to share a little bit about the Conejo Open Space Foundation, otherwise known as COSF. So for those of you who don't know us well, we are here to promote, protect, and preserve our beautiful open spaces here in the Conejo Valley so that everyone can enjoy them. And how we do that is through a lot of education, including the speaker series like this one tonight. We do have several of them throughout the year. And this year we are focusing on topics related to climate change and climate resiliency in our local community. We also do some wonderful partnerships with the great organization COSCA, which is the Conejo Open Space Conservation Agency. And COSCA and us work together on trail work days. Many of you have probably participated, and we go out and we fix the trails after erosion. We pull invasive species, we get down and dirty so that we make our trails look great. We also do things like trail education days, which is one of my favorites. We have the opportunity to bring out fourth graders from all across the Conejo Valley. And we get to take these wonderful kids out on the trails. They get to experience the wildlife, the vegetation. They learn all about trail safety and our environment. And it's such a wonderful day for them. We have also started recently some corporate education hikes. And so we involved our local business community and bringing out a group of their employees as an opportunity for team building and a fun way to do something for sustainability. So we're excited about that program. We also, I'm very excited about being in our second year of awarding student scholarships. So as a fundraising organization, we take great pride in awarding two $1,000 scholarships each year to students in the greater Ventura County area and to students who are excited about working in environmental science or related areas. So a fun time and a great opportunity to help our future leaders. So that's a little bit about the organization. Hopefully that helps you get excited about the work that we do. I really want to take this moment to quickly thank all of our volunteers. We couldn't do most of these events without you, so thank you tremendously. I also really want to thank our donors. We are, as I mentioned, an all volunteer organization, and we really try to help all the wonderful partner organizations in our area, and we can't do that without your support. So thank you to the donors as well. And now let me talk a little bit about our program tonight. I am so excited to have with us Betina Loudermilk. Betina has had a lifelong passion for animals and nature, and I love that. She is an accomplished horsewoman and was a riding instructor at Pierce College for well over a decade. She has been a whale naturalist for the Cabrillo Aquarium and has volunteered with the Friends of the Island Fox. In the last 7 years, Miss Loudermilk transformed her own backyard into a thriving garden for butterflies. And she now holds many educational lectures, sharing her experience and guidance with others, creating a very unique connectivity between our own homes and our local bugs. So very exciting, Betina, what you're doing, and thank you for sharing with us tonight. Before we pass it off to you, however, I want to go over some quick housekeeping items for everyone. All of our attendees are muted, just so you know. We have also taken care of the chat function for tonight, but we are leaving up that Q&A for you. Our presentation is about 45 minutes, give or take. We will have an opportunity at the end for those questions. We do welcome them and encourage you to submit them via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And with us tonight also is Ann Russell, who is the president of the Conejo Open Space Foundation. Ann, thank you so much for being with us. She will be our question and answer moderator, so she will lead that process at the end. And I do want to let all of you know that we are recording this event today. So if you want to go back later and you're like, what did Betina say? How do I do my garden? This will be available to all of you, or if you would like to share it with others, please encourage them to watch it. You can find it on our website in about 1 week. It does take us a little bit of time to put it up. And you can go to the website www.cosf.org. Okay, enough of my talking, Betina. We all want to hear from you. Please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tanya. I appreciate that. And I really appreciate this opportunity to join all of you guys and do a little presentation for you. So tonight we're going to talk about monarchs, the migration, and milkweed and its importance. Excuse me. So my name is Betina Loudermilk, and I have Betina's Little Farm and Butterfly Garden in Sun Valley that I just labor of love put together, and I like to do education presentations like this, so it all works together. Let's see. Uh-oh, my computer froze. Give me a second. Here we go. We're going to just quickly go over these little steps, how I got started, the monarch migration, a little bit of a history on that. We're going to do a quick study on the monarch life cycle. We're going to go over milkweed plants, why they're important, how to plant them, all of that fun stuff. Then we're going to switch and we're going to talk about the Western migration, the Western population and their migration, and the decline, and maybe this return that we're very excited about, and then things that we can do to further help the monarch butterfly. So just really quick, how I got started, back in about 2015, I had this empty backyard. I know I wanted to do something special with it. I somehow, some way learned about the plight of the monarch butterflies, and I decided that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to build a garden for them. But I couldn't find milkweed anywhere. It seemed like it was this mysterious plant that just didn't exist, and maybe it wasn't a California thing. But I went to this event for a group called Planet Rehab. He's no longer in California. He actually moved to Costa Rica. But when he was here, he had a bunch of monarch, the milkweed. And as I was looking at it, I noticed there was a caterpillar on one of them. And so that was a plant that I took home, and I named the caterpillar Fritz, because that's what you do. You name your things. And then in the process of watching him become a butterfly, which was kind of scary and unique. And I'd never done that in any of my classes as a kid. So it really made me want to know more. And that's kind of how this journey got started. Let's see. There we go. So this was my little setup. This is the milkweed plant. I took a hamper and flipped it upside down and just had it in there. And eventually he came off the plant and he crawled up to the top of the hamper and went into a J, and I thought I'd killed him. And then next thing you know, he the skin split open and he pupated, and that was amazing in and of itself. And then it takes a while, and we'll go through that whole process, but eventually he came out and was this big, beautiful butterfly. Unfortunately, as you know, as you're learning, this guy did not make it because I was holding him on my finger, and one of my cats was like, "Ooh, what's that?" and took a swat at him, and he unfortunately didn't survive from that. But I've kept him, and he's in a display case, and he is like my first little educational tool that I use. Occasionally, he's kind of a little on the fragile side, so I leave him here mostly, but if I do events at my house, I can bring him out. And so that is Fritz. And you can see that this is the beginning of my garden right here. So as I was learning, I started watching YouTube videos. I tried raising monarchs. It's really not that hard to do, but it's very time consuming. I found a group on Facebook called The Beautiful Monarch, and they were super duper helpful with their advice and their opinions. And then I would ask them for questions. I found out that a few of my friends knew about monarchs and knew about butterflies, which was like, what? You guys know about this stuff? Oh my gosh. And then I realized that my neighbors just across the street from me is the Theodore Payne Native Nursery. And so I started going over there and picking their brains and asking questions and learning about native plants. And that's when I knew I needed to put natives in my garden and make it a mostly native garden. But I also wanted to attract as many butterflies as I could to come into my garden. So I was buying all sorts of plants to throw in there to see what else would come into my garden. And then with all of that knowledge, and because I like teaching, it just made sense for me to start reaching out to groups and going to events and doing lectures and just educating, because when you go to events, you'll see booths about the island fox and the mountain lion and the raptors and the snakes, and there's nothing about the bugs. And so I'm like, that's me. I'm gonna be the bug lady. And so I've been to the P22 festival. I've been to the Chatsworth Nature Preserve open house. I've been to several other events, and I've also done lectures with Duke Majan at their wilderness center. So this has just been an amazing journey, and I'm just so excited to continue this and continue talking about butterflies and bugs in general. It's so important. So this just a quick little view of my garden. I started just clearing out all the weeds, put in a seating area. I decided how I wanted the garden to look, and I started putting plants everywhere. Added mulch. There was a seating area. I did end up putting fencing because my dog at the time decided it was fun to dig out every plant that I put in. And a lot of plants died because of that. But you can see the garden has changed many times. Things live, things die. And I'm still trying to figure out what are good plants to put in the garden. And I think I'm kind of there. So this last picture is the garden kind of as it is now. There are some non-natives in my garden, but they are also host plants for different butterflies. So there's two types of plants that you want to add into your garden: host plants, which is what they lay their eggs on and that the caterpillars eat, and then nectaring plants, which is what the adult butterfly comes to and nectars off of. And now not all butterflies nectar on plants. Some of them actually nectar on tree sap. Some of them nectar on rotten fruit. So I'm not going to be able to attract every species into my garden because I just can't put every single thing into my garden. But I do the best that I can, and I get quite a few visitors with what I have. So I've got the monarch, of course, comes through because I have milkweed in my garden. This is a hair streak. I also get the Ackman blues come through my garden because I have a lot of buckwheat, and that's their host plant. This is the fiery skipper. They're on grasses, and I actually do have several grass species in my garden for them. And they love nectaring on stuff. And this is a really fun butterfly to take pictures of because they will sit on all sorts of things and sit for a while. This is the cloudless sulfur, and he's nectaring off of a sticky monkey flower. And these guys are on my cassia plant, and I see these guys year round, and they're always in the back. And on a nice sunny day, there'll be 3 or 4 or 5 of them, 6 of them sometimes, flying back and forth. It's so much fun. A little more rare is the red admiral, and if you see, this plant is stinging nettle. Not a favorite for a lot of gardeners because it is that plant that if you touch it, it makes you itch. But the itching goes away pretty quick, and the plant is a great plant if you want to make teas with it. You can blanch it and make salads with it. I am not one for doing stuff like that because I'm not a very good cooker of things like that. So I just let it be the host plant for these guys. And it's also a host plant for the painted lady. And a few years ago, we had the painted lady migration where there were thousands of them going through the neighborhood and through the state. And they often stopped and nectared in my garden, which was just so fascinating to come out and see like 10 of them on one plant. And then another infrequent visitor is the morning cloak. And this guy is just the most beautiful butterfly. And I had a great encounter at my work with this guy. I was trying to videotape them, and he ended up landing on my cell phone. And so I couldn't show him to anybody because he was on my cell phone, but he let me put my finger up underneath him and put him out. And I don't know if it's a male or female, but I was able to put it out and show everybody this morning cloak. And he literally sat on my finger for a good minute or so before he decided to take off. So that, that doesn't happen very often. And honestly, that was the only time that's ever happened. So super exciting. So let's get into the monarch migration. The monarch is a native to Mexico, and it's really there that their journey begins. Even though it's kind of where it ends, it's also where it starts. So they overwinter in the mountain forests west of Mexico City on Oyamel fir trees during the winter time. So it gets really cold up by us, but not as cold down in Mexico. They do get winter storms, and that occasionally hurts the population, but it's not as bad as if they were to be staying in Canada or northern the United States. So when they're there in the wintertime, they're in a state called diapause, where they're taking a break from breeding. And they'll rest for the winter season, and then spring rolls around and they start coming out of diapause. They get that urge to fly north. And even though they're the 4th or 5th generation, they're technically the start of it all. So this generation has flown down from as far away as Canada to get to Mexico. It takes them about 5 to 6 months from coming down to having their rest period to flying back up. And then they'll start laying eggs on milkweed patches as they go. And that's when the journey begins. A female monarch will lay 1 egg at a time, and she can lay up to 500 eggs in her lifetime, which is mind-blowing. So here's a little map of the migration patterns. And so you can see it's broken into 2 patterns. There's the eastern migration, which is what is the most common one, with them going down to Mexico. And then there's ours, the western migration, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. So in the eastern migration, that last generation lays their eggs around the Texas border. They hatch, they pick up the mantle. When they become butterflies, they fly a little further north. They live, that generation, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd generation, live just a few weeks compared to the 5 to 6 months of that last generation. They'll make it all the way back up to Canada, and then it turns around, that last generation comes back down. Excuse me. There's also a little population in Florida that they're considering part of the eastern migration, but they actually might even get classified as their own little area, because they might not even migrate. Why do you have to go anywhere? Florida is lovely. The Bahamas are lovely. So they just kind of maybe stick around there. So it's a population that's being studied, but not enough is known about it. So then how did this get discovered? So it took one person, and it was a Canadian scientist named Dr. Fred A. Urquhart. And he started this research in 1937. He just took a fascination with monarchs. His wife, Nora, helped him, and about a team of 1,000 citizen scientists, students of his and his program. They all got involved with this. And what he did that was so unique is he developed a tagging system. How do you know where this little bug is going? So he found a sticker, he went out and collected them, he tested different sticker types on them, found which ones stuck and didn't come off because they have scales, and those scales kind of flake off. And so he needed something that would just stay put. And in that process, they were able to identify the migration routes, that it took several generations to do the migration, that the monarchs don't fly at night, and that they could travel up to 81 miles a day, which, wow, that's really impressive. But also their research showed that they would get to Texas and then they disappear. Where were they going? They obviously were going into Mexico somewhere, but where? And that's kind of where his research ended. And then this is where the Monarch Watch now has taken over the tagging process. And they give out a bunch of tags to people that pay for them and request them. And you can catch the butterflies and put the tags on and release them. And fingers crossed, maybe somebody will find them. There's a website if you do find one, and you can, and it's got an ID number. So you can go to that website and you can log in the information, and it'll tell you, you can tell where the butterfly was found and then where it was collected to get tagged in the first place, and they can kind of get information that way. So then in 1973, a Mexican businessman and a citizen scientist, just like you and I, his name is Kenneth Brugger. He reached out to Dr. Urquhart and he was like, I'd like to try and find the overwintering grounds. And the doc was like, go for it. So it took them a while, and it took a lot of hunting because they're up in the forests and it's hard to get up there and it's not so easy. But on January 9th in 1975, the first overwintering site was found, and there was over 1 billion monarchs basking in the trees. I mean, that's just mind blowing. He ended up going back in 1976 with his wife, Catalina, who's featured here on the cover, with the National Geographic. And while they were there filming and taking pictures, one of the tree branches fell down. And of course, cause for alarm, cause for panic. They wanted to save as many of the butterflies that were under the branch that they could. And in that process, they found a butterfly that was tagged, and its number was PS397. And they did the research, they plugged it in, and they discovered that it had been tagged in Minnesota, and it was released in 1975. So it took a while. That's about the 6-month time period for it to get down to Mexico. But it was like a 2,500 mile trip from where it started. And that's when they knew they found the missing piece, that the monarchs from America were coming to Mexico. And that's why they were all disappearing, because they were coming here to overwinter. And so, eureka, an exciting moment had been made. And can you imagine just being there and seeing that? And you can see this kind of if you go to Pismo Beach at the overwintering site there. Not quite as grand, but it's still impressive. So let's get into the monarch life cycle. So when they lay their egg, it takes about 3 to 5 days for that egg to hatch. The little itty bitty teeny tiny caterpillar comes out, turns around and eats the shell, which I think it gives it like a little boost of nutrients. They don't have any protection from the toxic sap of the milkweed, so they have to eat just a little bit of it at a time to build up that immunity to it. And then eventually, as they're growing and getting bigger, they're going to shed their skin 5 times, which you can see in this bottom picture. Each cycle here, each stage is called an instar. Excuse me. And they will actually shed their whole skin and their face cap and get a little bit bigger, just like a snake does. They will only eat milkweed. So that's why we're just harping on milkweed. It is the only plant that they will eat. When they get big enough, they go and they hang in a J. And this is an impressive feat that they do. Then they shed their skin that last time, and there's this green chrysalis underneath, and inside that is goo. And that goo transforms into this beautiful butterfly. And I like to think of it as, if you remember in the olden days, and I think the LA Zoo still has it, where they have the injection molds where you could put your dollar in, and it had a form, and it shut, and it sprayed the plastic inside, and then it popped open. And then it came out, and you had a giraffe or a gorilla or whatever. So this chrysalis, actually, if you look at it closely, has all the shape of the wing and the antenna and the abdomen, and all the little bits and pieces are there. So it's like it grows into that mold. This is just my theory. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's definitely a really interesting phase and an interesting thing to see. And then they come out, and they're something completely different. It's mind-blowing. It's so amazing. But that is, so now we need to talk about milkweed, because it is the most important plant for them, but it's important for a bunch of other reasons too. So milkweed is known as Asclepias. It's an herbaceous perennial plant. There's about 200 species of milkweed. It is considered a weed because it just spreads all over the place, but it's not really invasive from what I've seen. Milkweed is identified because it has a milky sap, that has flowers with 5 united petals. It has pod-like fruits where the seed is. And the seeds are usually tufted, and that tuft is like a silk, and it pulls the seed out of the shell, and it carries it off into the wind to start its own new little plant. There are a few species that are grown horticulturally, the main one being A. cursavica, or tropical milkweed, which is the plant that I got when I got Fritz. And it's proving to be a problem for monarchs, but we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So here you can see the 5 points, the seed pod, the little hair tufts, the little seed right there. And then it's getting ready to get, blown out with the wind. And here's a lovely monarch chewing on the flower. They do typically chew the leaves, but if they're really hungry or they get a taste of the flower, I think it's super sweet that they want to eat that. Just like, we want that candy bar over the salad. Every once in a while, I got to mix it up. So milkweed can be found in North and South America. It can also and in Africa. It can be found in Australia and Hawaii, but it's not native to those areas. And they do have populations of monarchs in those places, but they're not native to those places. Kind of like for us, the Gulf fritillary came up with the passion vine. It's not really native to California, but it's here because its plant is here. So here are some reasons that milkweed is important. In Native American tribes, they used it for medicinal purposes. It was known as Watha with the Omaha Nation. They also used the fibers from the plant, and I think also from the seed, those little seed fibers that we saw. They wove it with rabbit fur and other things to make clothing with it. It cured many different ailments. It was edible if you knew what you were doing. Nowadays we don't, so I really don't encourage anyone to try it. It was listed as an herbal remedy in the US from 1820 to 1936. And nowadays, with people wanting to try to go green and find things that are sustainable, milkweed floss, so like the stem kind of stripped down, is being used for insulation in coats and blankets because it is hypoallergenic. And they mix it with goose feathers, and it's starting to make a resurgence in the clothing world. And it can be used for ropes, cords, strings. And that milkweed sap contains about 2% latex. So back in World War II, the Nazis and the US tried to make rubber from it, but it wasn't enough to really be worth it. So it kind of got scrapped. It does have a deadly importance. So all parts of the plant contain toxic cardiac glycosides. It's highest when it's found in the plant's latex, and it's most toxic when it reaches maturity. So some of the symptoms will show up in a few hours. You could have an upset stomach, nausea, lethargy, weakness. It can cause seizures, heart rhythm changes, and it is potentially poisonous to humans as well as animals. And I have a story that I'll share real quick that I did a road trip to Utah to Monument Valley, and we did the tour with a Navajo guide. And we got to this one spot and I spotted some milkweed plants and ran over because I was so excited. It's a milkweed plant, woohoo! And it was too late in the season for there to be any monarchs on it, but I still wanted to go see it. And she literally like tried to stop me from going over there. And she said that her elders don't like people going here because it can hurt the animals and that sheep have died from overgrazing on it. And I explained to her that, I know what it is and I understand the repercussions of it, but it's not going to hurt me if I don't break the sap or break the plant and stuff. And so she was cool and she kind of settled down a little bit and I took a bunch of pictures and it was pretty amazing. But yeah, I mean, it is known by the tribal, our tribes, our natives that it can be a dangerous thing. If you are handling milkweed at home and you get the sap in your eye or on your skin, you want to wash it off immediately. Because it can really be an irritant, especially if it's in your eye, and it can be really bad that you have to go to the hospital. So just a little aside. So then you're going to be like, well, why do I want to plant this? This is a horrible plant, but it's not. I mean, if you're not going to mess with it, it's a great plant. I would maybe not let your dog go and sit in the garden and chew on the leaves and stuff, but it's really not that bad of a plant. It's only bad if you make it bad. And, but that bad is important to our bug. And this is who we're talking about. So the milkweed is the host plant and the only plant that the monarchs will lay their eggs on and that the caterpillars will eat for that reason. They want that toxic sap to gain some protection. It does make them taste bad. So if you think about it, a flock of birds will come to a tree and eat all the caterpillars that are on the tree or the plant. And there goes that generation potentially, but they'll come to the monarchs and, one of the birds eats a monarch and goes, oh my God, you guys, that was disgusting. Don't eat any more of them. And they all fly away to something else. So that one guy that sacrificed his life saved everybody else. And there was a chance for the caterpillar to become the butterfly. And so that is one of the reasons why they're on that plant and that plant in particular. Also their coloration is a warning sign like, hey, I'm probably not going to taste good. Don't eat me. So it's the plant is bad in some ways, but it's good in so many other ways. So it is an important plant to have. And, it's here. So we shouldn't be taking it out just because of the toxic sap or because it's considered a weed. It has a purpose and a very important one. But not all of them do. So here is the tropical milkweed, beautiful plant, absolutely stunning. I mean, look at that color. Who wouldn't want that in their garden? And unfortunately, this plant isn't going to go away because you can go to any botanical garden and it's there. And it's all over the place and it's sold everywhere. But the problem with this plant is that it does not go dormant. So our native plants in the wintertime completely disappear and don't come back till the springtime, because that is when the monarch is supposed to be migrating and it's not supposed to be laying eggs and breeding and doing any of that anymore. So it's becoming a problem because the monarchs still see this plant and go, oh, there's still milkweed here. That's fine. I'll just, I'll hang out. I don't need to go anywhere. I'm good. But what's happening then is the plant starts to get infested with Ophiocystis electroscura, otherwise known as OE. And it's a little spore, it's a little parasite, and it kind of shakes all over the plant and the butterfly will land on it. It will get onto them. They'll go to the next plant, sprinkle some of it down onto that. The caterpillars will eat it. They'll become weak. The butterflies become weak. That whole generation becomes weak. And, it's kind of ruining the population a little bit. And it's showing that the monarchs are maybe coming out of diapause because they're like, well, we don't have to take a break. We can just keep breeding and keep doing. But nature didn't design them to be that way. They designed them to take a break from breeding so the plant can take a break and regenerate. And this plant is kind of throwing everybody for a curveball. But if you have this plant, I'm going to say keep it. But I'm going to highly recommend that you make it mimic what the native is doing and chop it back to the ground in the wintertime. And I know it's sad because it'll get 6 feet tall and it'll be big and beautiful, but you want to chop it down for the health of the butterflies. And just chop it back, keep it trimmed down. It'll grow. It always comes back. And then if it doesn't come back, that's your opportunity to go get some natives and put some native plants in the garden, because that's what you really want. But that's the tropical milkweed. And, you know, it's here, it's in my mom's garden, and I make her chop it back. I actually go and chop it back for her, so that it serves its purpose and is healthy, for the ecosystem. So here are some native options that you can put in your garden. My favorite is the narrow leaf milkweed. I find that it has I find that the monarchs like it the most. But there's also woolly pod milkweed is another good one that you can find. Theater Payne typically has these two for sale, and they're real easy to propagate as well. I have yet to see heartleaf milkweed, but look how pretty that is. There's desert milkweed, there's rush milkweed, and there's California milkweed. I have rush milkweed in my garden, and this is the first year that I've actually seen monarchs on it, eating on it. So that was like super exciting. And I did find one that actually got big enough to pupate, and he might actually have even come out today. I'm gonna have to go check. And then the other one is California milkweed. And this one my friend has in her garden. It's up in the deserts more. And she said she gets a ton of monarchs on that. So like super exciting. I did try growing this in my garden and it just didn't like my yard. But you know, maybe I did something wrong. So I might try it again. So if you want to start planting milkweed, now is not the time to plant milkweed. It's too hot. It's going to be too hot. And now is really not the time to plant anything native, but you can plant it in like around November. You can start getting it going around then. But you want to think about where milkweed has been historically. So you don't want to plant it along the California coast within 5 miles of overwintering sites north of Santa Barbara, and within 1 mile of overwintering sites south of Santa Barbara. This is from the Xerces Society. So you want to kind of plant it more where they're going to come out of their overwintering area and do their spring and summer breeding. So I like the narrow leaf milkweed. You can put it in a variety of soil types. It prefers full sun, but it's okay with partial shade. You need to water it really good till it gets established. And then once it's established, you can water it like once a week, give it a really good soaking, and then it's fine. And you might even be able to ignore it for a while. It does grow in pots. So if all you have is a balcony or a little small garden, it's going to be just fine. And then just know that it's going to go dormant in the wintertime. It's going to completely die back. But it will regenerate in the spring. You'll see new little babies coming off of it. And it's an amazing process. It also does spread by rhizomes. So that means it's going through the roots and new shoots are coming up. But I've really not found it to be invasive in any way. It does kind of go into other areas, but it's not a bad thing. And I think I just skipped a slide here. Nope, we're good. So you just need to kind of have a little bit of a green thumb and some patience. You can also start them from seed if you're really patient. I've not had luck with that. I tend to try to do it with cuttings. That seems to be the easiest. So let's get into, are we losing a species? Let's focus on the Western monarch. So we talked about there's two groups, the Eastern population that's east of the Rockies, the Western population, which is our area. So it's butterflies from Arizona, California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Utah. And they will make that migration to the California coast. They can be found on non-native blue gum eucalyptus. And they can also be found on native Monterey pine, Monterey cypress, and redwood trees. At the Pismo Beach area, they are on the eucalyptus, and they're slowly trying to introduce the Monterey pine to get the monarchs to kind of switch over to realize that their native plant is here. And then as the eucalyptus die out, they're not going to replace them. So they're trying to train the monarchs to go back to their native plant. And I think it'll work eventually. It's just going to take a lot of time. So here's where things got a little dicey. In 2018 and 2019, the number of monarchs overwintering in California dropped to 1% of the historic population size of over 1 million. In 2020, that number dropped even further to less than 0.01% of the historic size. So volunteers counted less than 2,000 monarchs in 2020 during the Western Monarch Thanksgiving count. So that meant that for every 2,200 monarchs out there 30 years ago, there was only one left flying today, which that's just scary. And come on, work. There we go. So here is like a little graph to kind of show you where the numbers were. And you can see they do this fluctuation where they bounce up and down, but then they just went down. And then they went down to where it's barely even a blip on this chart. So why are the numbers looking better this year? I mean, if they're that down that low, what happened? So it's likely a combination of things. Favorable conditions on breeding grounds, response to favorable temperatures, that we might have had some more rainfall that was actually growing, producing more milkweed, and that there was more milkweed out there for them to lay eggs on, which raised the population just in that process alone. Some other theories out there is that perhaps monarchs from Mexico decided they didn't want to go up the traditional route and came our way and laid eggs and got a population kind of starting that way. And it's also possible that more overwintering sites were discovered. So the numbers were jumped up just on that, because, if you only have 5 sites and now you found 3 more, that ups the numbers too. And then they're thinking that the monarchs might be breeding along the coast during the winter months in response to the way that the climate has been changing. And so it might be changing a lot of things out there as well. So it's definitely looking better, but it's optimistically cautious. So they're thinking that we are going to see some increases in the population, but it's still dangerously close to extinction. So we need to keep pushing on the fact that there are threats to the butterfly. They need more more habitat. They need more milkweed plants. They need, for us to use less pesticides. They're excited about the 2021 uptick. But it could still drop down and it could rise up again. So we just need to keep that optimism up there that this is just the start of a good uptick, but just to, be aware that it could still drop. And so I liked these slides that I found. This was again from the Xerces Society, and this is an amazing site if you want to go and learn a lot more information. So this area in yellow, the monarchs do not overwinter here, but from about that all the way down and pretty much down to the Baja coast right there to Baja, California, are the different breeding areas where they can not breed, but where they overwinter. And then from there, they kind of move into their 2 different spots, and like their migration kind of goes out this way. There's also a population of butterflies on our Channel Islands. And honestly, nobody's really doing any research on those ones. So hopefully maybe those numbers will get included and be a part of the study one day. But you can see like in this area is where we really want to plant milkweed, and then out towards pretty much just everywhere. Just put milkweed everywhere except for in those couple of spots where the breeding areas or the overwintering areas are. Sorry. And then this map was super fascinating. This is from the Monarch Milkweed Mapper, and they do a study of milkweed, where it is, and what is being seen with it. So all these green patches are where there's milkweed, and then all the orange patches are where monarchs have been spotted. And then the purple patches is where they've seen monarchs breeding, which was super, like that's super cool. So, and you can see that they kind of extend really far out. And I think as these patches, these green patches build up, we're going to see more orange patches with them and more purple patches with them. But it's all from us citizen scientists putting things on iNaturalist and letting the scientists know what's going on. So what can we do to help? We've seen that the numbers declined, and then they've gone up a little bit, and they could potentially keep going up. But we've got to plant more native milkweed species. We need to plant nectar plants. Again, ideally things that are native to your area. And off the top of my head, I love lilac verbena. Either kind, there's 2 native kinds, but either one is fine. California fuchsia, hummingbird sage, sunflowers, the native sunflowers. Those are buckwheats. Those are all really good nectaring plants that you can put into your garden. And there are smaller ones to bigger ones. So depending on your size for your garden, you'll pick the plant that works best for you. We need to stop using pesticides. And you don't need pesticides. If you get bugs in your garden, guess what? The birds are going to come and they're going to eat the bugs. And the bugs that eat bugs are going to come. Yeah, they're going to take out some of your caterpillars, but that's the circle of life. And that's what they're there for. We need our caterpillars to feed our birds. And one of my go-to points, my soapbox points, is that if we don't save the bugs, we don't save the birds, we don't save the lizards, we don't save the rats. And then in that process, we're taking away a food source that's for the bobcat, for the coyote, for the deer, because they need the certain plants. And then that then becomes, it takes away from the mountain lion. So our whole food chain is affected if we don't take care of our plants and our bugs. More so than, we always talk about rodenticides, but we need to focus on the bugs and the plants. You can contribute to community science projects. You can post photos of what you're seeing on iNaturalist, and you can support groups like the Xerces Society, Monarch Joint Venture, Theodore Payne Nursery, and the California Native Plant Society. Those are all just little steps that we can do that make for big steps. I'm going to just really quickly touch on this. So I told you in the beginning that I collected monarchs and that I was raising monarchs because the thought was, well, if I raise them and I can throw out 100 more butterflies than there would have been if they lived on their own, maybe I can help the population that way. But if we think about it, in nature, only 1 to maybe 2% of the butterflies survive in the wild. Those caterpillars survive in the wild. So by me throwing in an extra 100, nature wasn't ready for those. There might not be enough plants for them. There might not be enough, food source. And so that was causing a problem. And I might be breeding weaker species. And because only 1 or 2% is going to survive. So maybe I threw out some butterflies that really shouldn't have been there. And that's going to weaken the population by that. And because of all of that, there are now put on and not just because of that, but because of a bunch of other things, they are on the list to be marked as an endangered species, but because there's a bunch of animals in front of them, they're not going to be officially listed until 2024. But in California, not too long ago, I believe last year, they were listed on their terrestrial and vernal pool invertebrates of conservation, and they are identified as a species of greatest conservation need. So the Fish and Game section of the California Law 1002 prohibits us from collecting, handling, removing them from the wild, taking them for scientific or propagation purposes, including captive rearing. And the only way you can possibly do that is to get a collection permit And even that they're kind of limiting what they're doing. So it's really better to just not collect them right now. Let nature do what it's going to do. Plant your natives. That's the best way to help them, I feel, at this point. So now you know everything. You're good to go. We've gone over the migration, the life cycle, you know about milkweed and why it's important to us and to monarchs. You've learned about both types of the migrations. And hopefully you've seen that there is a little glimmer of hope out there for our population of monarchs and also for the Eastern migration. They're doing a lot to help them out too. And the best thing we can do is plant more natives, keep track of the monarchs, especially with that iNaturalist app. It's really easy to upload on your phone, or get your grandkids or kids to do it and make it a family project. And I just want to thank everybody for being here and attending. And I really enjoyed this presentation. And these are some resources if you want to look up some information in the future. Of course, me, Betina's Little Farm, just add .com to the end and you'll find me. The Beautiful Monarch Facebook page, Theater Pain Nursery, it's located in Sun Valley. There's the Butterfly Farm in Encinitas is another amazing resource. And then of course the xerces.org, Western Monarch Count, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, and the Monarch Joint Venture. And I didn't add on there, but the California Native Plant Society is also a great resource. So thank you everybody. And I'm gonna turn it back to Tanya. And I'll just leave this up for now. So it's here. And then all of this it's being recorded so you can catch up on all of this in the future if you need to. And thanks everybody.
Wonderful, Betina. Thank you so much. I don't think I've ever learned so much about monarchs in my life. So this is really fantastic. And, for someone who maybe 10, 15 years ago, I would see an orange butterfly and think that was a monarch, right? So it's really nice to be able to know now that monarchs are different than painted ladies or different than other species, right? So,
right.
And just fascinating to know that these wonderful, beautiful little creatures can travel 81 miles in a day. I mean,
wow.
That's fascinating. So, thank you so much, Betina, for sharing some of this information. I do know that we have some great questions from the audience.
Awesome.
So Betina, if you're ready, and Anne, if you want to guide us through some Q&A, let's see what the audience has to say.
Yeah, thank you. We have a question about a requirement by California State that commercial nurseries treat milkweed with BT to fight infection, plant infection. Is that a problem for the monarchs? I mean, what does that mean in terms of when you buy it at a regular like Green Thumb nursery or something?
Yeah. So yeah, that is a problem for the monarchs, because they, it's a chemical and it is going to affect them. And I've had that happen where I've bought plants from a nursery and fed it to my caterpillars when I was, years ago doing that, and they all died. And so that's super heartbreaking. So the best thing we can do is to encourage our nurseries to tell their growers that they want these plants with looking crappy. That's why they do it. They spray those plants so that the plants look beautiful when you go to buy them. And but that's not the point of the plant. The plant is there to be a food source, and it's there to maybe look a little ugly. And so we want to really encourage our nurseries and their growers to stop using that because it's a food source. Yeah. Great question.
And I mean, your safest bet is probably growing them from seed.
Growing them yourself, or going to Theater Pain Nursery and buying them there because they don't treat anything. Another good source, it's a little far for you guys, is the Haha Munga Nursery in Pasadena by JPL. They also grow native plants. Or, if you come to my place, I might have a couple of babies I can spare. I definitely will have plenty of seeds. So just hit me up. I might be able to help you out too.
And Matilaha Nursery in Simi also carries native plants. That's another.
Oh, fantastic.
One. Yeah, that's another.
Yes, one. I don't know your area as well. So great resources.
So now You did run through a list quickly of the plants that would be easy to grow in a drought tolerant garden. Can you just repeat that? People are asking to hear the
Yes.
names again.
So my top favorites are lilac verbena. There's verbena delamina, and then there's I think it's there. Those names just don't stick in my head. But if you remember lilac verbena, and you go to Theodore Payne Nursery, they will have both of them. I think it's Paseo verbena. I'm so bad with names. I apologize. Buckwheat is another great one. There's a couple of different kinds. There's the kind that you would see along the freeways and in our mountains. That gets really, really big. So only plant that if you've got a big space. But there's a lot of buckwheats that are a lot smaller. California fuchsia was another one. Hummingbird sage is another really good one. And monkey flowers, if you want to grow monkey flowers, those are a good one. Penstemons are fun. Yeah, there's a good.
And
good
are
start.
those are the ones that are top ones for the adult butterflies to actually get the nectar from, right?
Yeah, nectar. Yeah,
which they need for their travels.
Exactly. And for that breeding, that energy for breeding and laying eggs, and yeah.
Also, we have a question about the toxicity of the plants. All milkweeds are toxic. My understanding is that animals kind of know that and avoid them. But we have a participant who's asking about, is it going to poison the dog? Is it going to poison the squirrels? Is it going to poison the rabbits? And my observation is that in the wild, they just leave that stuff alone. They don't touch it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I can state that, if you have, I'm sorry, if you have a dumb dog that like my dog was, I had a very dumb dog that just liked to get into all of my plants. I blocked her from even going into the garden. I don't think she would have eaten it. Occasionally I do have a little farm, and every once in a while I'm bad about shutting the gate. And the critters get out and they go into my garden and wreak havoc, but they've never eaten the milkweed. I even have gypsum weed in my garden. They haven't touched that either. They go for the buckwheat. They go for the vegetables that I have going in the garden. And at my work, we're on 7 acres, and I have a nice big milkweed patch, and there's lots of rabbits, lots of ground squirrels. And I've never seen them go after the milkweed at all. So I don't think it's really a problem. Yeah.
I think the native animals know to avoid it. And as I said, if you take one bite of it, it tastes awful, and the animals have a sense of what's good and what's bad. They're not going to bother, I think.
I agree.
And speaking of eating things, is there anything that preys on the butterflies themselves once they're in their adult phase? Like what eats them? I mean, they taste bad too, right?
I'm sure they do, but I have seen pictures of birds eating them, squirrels, praying mantis, other bugs will get them. Yeah, like rodents. Rodents actually go after the caterpillars more than I've seen them go after butterflies, but definitely other bugs, birds. I've even seen like a hawk with a little monarch in its talons and stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like I think it was a peregrine falcon, like a little hawk. And but I can't imagine that would be much of a food source.
Yeah, so, and I thought that the effect of the milkweed consumption remains in the adult butterfly, but that maybe that's not 100% true. I don't know, but
I believe it. I believe it's true, and it's just like some people like salsa and some people don't.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I would be like to the salsa because I don't like it, but all my friends are like more. So
well, there's also predation of the caterpillars too, in terms of like the parasitic flies and stuff, which is one of the really heartbreaking factors. If you
it's awful.
Not that you should be raising them yourself at this point, but for my
you're not allowed to anymore. But definitely when I was rearing them, if you collected them as a bigger caterpillar, and even the eggs can get parasiticized, and you'll see your egg just turn brown and spotted, and there's the tachnid fly inside. But but it's the worst with the caterpillars because you don't know it's there until it pupates and goes into the chrysalis, and then your chrysalis turns brown. Excuse me. And you'll see this thread coming out of it, and it'll come out of the caterpillars too if it's, you know, eager to get going. And then you'll see the little like grub on the bottom, and then that turns into its pupa, and it turns into the tachnid fly, and the cycle starts over again.
Yeah. It's really pretty disgusting. But as you said, you know, the circle of life and all that.
Right.
We have a question about that, the no-fly zone there where you're not supposed to be planting milkweed. Is there any part of Ventura County that would fall into that area?
I would think so. Yes.
It's only 1 mile south of like
Santa Barbara. Yeah. I'd have to double check on that. I would have to research that a little bit more. But you could probably look that up on the Xerces Society website. That's where I got most of that information.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to like delve into that a little bit further, that I would go with the Xerces Society. They really study our population of monarchs.
Yeah. We've had several questions about wildfire, and this has been a puzzlement to me too, which is for the year in which we had the worst wildfires ever in all recorded history of California. That's the year in which they essentially made their big recovery. So What do you think happened there? Was it that they were simply not in the fire zones, or did the fires actually help in terms of allowing greater growth of milkweed? I mean, I know that's one theory about the recovery, is that it may have been sparked by the wildfires, that the wildfires actually helped the recovery.
And I honestly, I don't know enough about that. And, I'm not on the front lines with those groups that do all that research. But I was curious about that too, because it seemed like those fires burned almost our entire state. Right.
Yeah.
And, but I also feel like there's so many more people that are now awake about milkweed and planting it, that it's in gardens. And I think that also created a haven for our monarchs. Even though it burns through an area, it doesn't burn everything. And so, like up in our forest, in the Angeles forest right here by me, my friend lives at Chileo Campground, and it didn't burn to where she was at. And there's a couple of patches of milkweed up there that were fine. So even though it burns through an area, it doesn't burn the entire space. So I'm sure there's pockets that survived. And milkweed grows back really fast too.
And
so
none of the fires burned through the overwintering grounds. I mean, that would have been the most devastating thing of all, is that it's swept through like the Pismo Beach Reserve or whatever, and it didn't. I mean, everybody has probably noticed that there are a lot more spring flowers in the years that follow the fires. And, so in terms of nectaring opportunities, there's actually more nectaring opportunity thanks to the fires having burned off all the ground cover.
I agree.
Now we're getting questions about pesticide and questions about BT. I can answer the BT question, which is that is short for a bacteria which nobody can pronounce, and that's why it's called BT. That's it's short for its botanical name, and that is actually, it's intended as a biological control. It's not a true pesticide. It's actually a naturally occurring organism. And it fights different kinds of plant rot and fungus and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it has a very positive impact. Unfortunately, it has a negative impact on caterpillars, because they eat the leaves and they get the bacteria, and it's really not great. So, like all pesticides and rodenticides and all insecticides, they all exist for a reason, to address a certain problem. But in the process of addressing that problem, it causes other problems. So yeah, the genesis of the law is well intended. the outcome is not always as desired. I mean, you see that to a much greater degree with the neonicotinoids that are used on plants as a systemic treatment that then kill bees. I mean, that's been, that has been probably more than any other factor, the, consequence of the colony collapse disease. So, be in touch with your legislators is all I can say. I mean, the reason they haven't banned pesticides is we're an agricultural state and there are billions and billions of dollars at stake in crops. So,
yeah. And I feel like, if they need to do that for their crops, I understand. And, but a lot of farmers could go back into adding native plants around their borders. And because they want to bring in pollinators to, help their plants grow. So instead of bordering their crops with, geraniums or things like that, they could border their plants with natives and actually be very beautiful. And I don't know if you've seen the video of the biggest little farm. That, I mean, they are trying to cohabitate and they have a lot of native plants in their setup. And I think that's a business model that a lot of farmers need to start following. Yeah. And us gardeners too in the backyards. We can do more.
Yeah.
And I would say, like I tell everybody, if you like a certain non-native plant, plant it. It's okay. And I love not geraniums. I love Gerbera daisies and I love dahlias. And, I have some of them in my garden. I love succulents. I think succulents are amazing. But I got some native succulents to mix in with it. And there's actually some native succulents, the sedums, that are a host plant for some of our butterflies too. So, win. And then mix it in with some natives and it can look really pretty. And honestly though, my non-natives are kind of in a separate area from my natives because they look odd with the natives. They don't quite look right with them.
Well, the other thing is with natives versus non-natives, and we'll get to that question of what is a native in a second, because that's a really tough question. But
yeah.
Let's say that the garden center plants, those tend to need a lot of water, even in the summertime. And if you water the plants that have adapted to live here, the endemic plants, if you water them in the summertime, you're going to kill them, literally kill them. So you really can't intermingle them too closely, because if you have a tropical plant, like I grow the passion flower plants that are the host for the Gulf fritillary, those need a lot of water. I mean, they come from, I don't know, I think they come from like Brazil.
They're South America. Yeah.
They're South American.
Very tropical.
They're used to being rained on, and that's not how it works here. So to get to the highly political and contentious question of what a native is, it's like, that's a hard one to answer. I don't know. How do you define it? I mean, it's
from what I have learned from like the California Native Plant Society, I believe it's any plants that have been here over 100 years ago. And so if 100 years ago these plants were here, then that's what a native is. And anything beyond that is not.
We know that allegedly that the Spanish friars brought the
mustard,
absolutely god awful, terrible mustard, right? Okay.
Yeah.
I have not a good thing to say about that stuff. It's a fire starter. It's just, it's hideous when it dies. It squeezes out the legitimate native plants. That thing came here 300 years ago, maybe, but it's still not considered a native. That's why this is such a tricky question. There's fillery, which is cranesbill, the little tiny pink flowers. That came in the 1500s. It's still not welcome, but we'll never get rid of it. I mean, there's that intermediate classification called naturalized, where something has gone completely wild and is throughout the open space. And it's not a native, but it's been here so long that it's kind of established itself.
It's kind of here.
Yeah.
And I think it just comes down to habitat management and what plants do you want growing and what plants don't you want. So if you're noticing that the mustard is just overtaking the mountainside and it's strangling out, the other things that could be living there and being a better part of the ecosystem, then yeah, you want to go in and pull the mustards out. I know in a lot of areas, fennel is a really bad one. So they like in Griffith Park, I remember there being tons of fennel, and now they're pulling it out. Milk thistle is another like awful plant. Oh my God, that plant is awful. And I remember, being a horse rider, riding into Griffith Park, there's one little trail that it was never anything in there. And now like a couple of milk thistles started, and now the whole mountainside is like milk thistle, and it's just an awful looking plant. It's got a cool flower when it flowers, but man, you don't even want to touch that thing.
The fennel is a real problem in the Conejo open space. That's we've actually funded eradication, but that stuff is tenacious. It's pretty amazing. We have a question about aphids.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, the milkweed that I was telling you about earlier that I saw growing right here, totally covered with those orange tropical aphids, awful little critters. But in my experience, you can either spray them off with a hose, or you leave them on there, and aphid eaters will show up, ladybugs will show up. Yeah, they are as I was saying in another talk, they are the jelly donuts of the insect world. That literally everything preys on them. So
yeah, everything wants them. And honestly, so many gardeners that I've spoken with are like, aphids are bad. They kill your plant. They'll destroy everything. I have not seen that. And if you were to come to my house and go out and see my rush milkweed, there's a ton of aphids on it. Plant's still fine. If you go and the caterpillars were eating around the aphids. But if you go to spray it, you could potentially be spraying off baby caterpillars. You could potentially be, damaging eggs. And because you really have to hit it hard to get those aphids off, because those suckers will stay on there. Yeah. And you could pinch them, which that's just gross for me. I can't do that. And you can do that, but there's also, again, that potential of taking out a little baby caterpillar that are so tiny you can't see them. And so I just leave them. And like you said, nature is going to do what nature is going to do. She does it so well to take care of herself that we really need to back off a little bit more and let her do her thing.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that there is a little bug called an aphid eater tells us that, Mother Nature kind of has this one under control, but you may have to wait a little bit. So
yeah, it might not be the first season, but maybe the fifth season.
Yeah. And plants are evolved to deal with predation. That's just the nature of plants, because they're rooted in one place. They can't run away. So they have to have their own mechanisms, including, the willingness to sacrifice some leaves and so on. I don't think aphids in an open environment where there's wind and there's predation and stuff, I don't think aphids really present a deadly problem.
I agree.
They're gross.
I agree with that.
That's about the best you could say about them.
They're gross.
Yeah. Let's see. We have a little bit more question about the change in the Fish and Wildlife rules about not raising them yourself. I mean, there are a number of reasons for that. One of them was that, as you were mentioning, there's this in the tropical milkweed, which a lot of home raisers, a lot of butterfly farmers depend on the tropical milkweed, that then spreads disease. And my understanding is that is one of the reasons that CDFW decided to make it illegal.
That law. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's that disease that I mentioned, the OE, the ophryscist electrosclera, another one of those hard ones to say, so we just say OE. But yeah, that little spore gets all over the place and multiplies, and the butterfly will land on that plant, take that spore with it, pass it on to the next plant, pass it on to the next plant. And then, the caterpillars then come along, and these guys there shouldn't be caterpillars in the wintertime. That's when the butterfly is supposed to be taking a break and not breeding. But here they are, because there's the plant, but now they're eating that spore and it's weakening them. And so that generation that becomes butterfly might not be strong enough to do the migration, or even if they're not at the migrating generation, just to survive in general. So they're going to produce a weaker population, and then, you know, we kind of implode the population there. So I was kind of against it in the beginning, because I was like, I want to raise them, you know, like it's a great way to teach people about stuff. But honestly, you don't have to raise monarchs. Go for the other caterpillars. They're all just as easy to raise. They really are. I've raised mourning cloaks. I've raised Gulf fritillaries. I've raised the sulfurs. I think the painted ladies, I've done those. And I've done the painted ladies without getting the kit. Their host plant, when they were coming through with the migration, I found a ton of them on fiddleneck. And and it was really funny. I was on the side of the road collecting fiddleneck and looking for painted ladies for caterpillars and whatnot. And my horse vet pulls up and he's like, "What you doing?" I'm like, "I'm collecting fiddleneck." And he's like, "Why?" And I'm like, "For the caterpillars." And he's like, "Here, everybody is, trying to get rid of fiddleneck because it's toxic for horses, and you're collecting it to feed butterflies." Okay. But it was very easy to keep them in a tub. And just, you got to keep giving them fresh plants. That's the main requirement is, if you keep them in captivity, you need to give them fresh plants every day, because that's what they eat in the wild, is fresh plants every day. And but it's definitely doable with other species. So, let the monarchs do their thing, and jump onto something else.
And the captivity is the key word there. They're not going to come and like take you off to jail if you have them in your backyard, of course. I mean,
Right.
if they're going through their natural phase, it's just that when you start to put them in an enclosure and make them completely dependent on you for feed, then
Correct.
that's when troubles can sometimes begin with the infection. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So
And I think that was the big problem with growers and people that grow caterpillars for butterfly release parties. And I think I did a little bit of research into it, and there's a couple of butterfly farms that do this specifically in California, but they're growing painted ladies. That's the only species that they offered, which that's great. And their butterflies have such a symbiosis with us in meaning. And it's to honor the dead, it's to celebrate new life. So they, releasing a butterfly at a funeral is, especially if it's a painted lady, where it's okay to release that. I'm not opposed to it, but that's also a really rough game. Sometimes these butterflies don't survive being put in a little piece of paper and shipped across to wherever to be released. And so that's kind of a rough one, but it is what it is. And
Ladies, I think we're getting close to our time. I know we
Okay.
can talk about this, and I keep seeing new questions popping up.
I know.
Sorry.
Okay.
But maybe we have an opportunity for one or two last ones.
Okay,
Sure.
I'll ask a quick one, because I said all those mean things about the tachnid flies earlier. Tachnid flies, as somebody points out here, Barb points out, that they're used for integrated pest management because they are a predator fly and they will kill unwanted stuff. So she's asking if you actually are using the tea flies as part of integrated pest management. Obviously, you don't want the monarchs anywhere near there, right? So you probably shouldn't be planting milkweed in amongst your vegetables. Hoping you don't want to lure the monarchs right to where the tachnid flies are.
But you know what? They're going to be there anyway.
Well, that's true. Virtually everybody.
It's just,
yeah.
You can only do so much. They're going to find them.
Yeah.
And like nature will find a way. And if you're a Jurassic Park fan, you can do the best that you can do, and that's all you can do. And nature will just take care of things from there.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody has said thank you, which is really nice. I appreciate that. And yay. So I hope I got to everybody's questions more or less. You had mentioned your butterfly was a he. Can you clarify for people that males and females look different and how? The monarchs.
So in the monarchs, which is pretty much the only species I can identify, male and female,
Right.
on the bottom wing, so they have their top wing and then they have the more cylindrical bottom wing. The males have very thin veins that run through. And you know what? Let me share my screen again really quick, and go see if it'll let me go back up to that slide. If you guys just bear with me for 1 secundo. Here we go. So if you look on this one, I would say that this is a male, and you can see that the little lines right here, these little veins are pretty thin. And then there's this spot, and because the wing is folded up, you don't really see the dot. But if the wing were open, those veins would be really thin, and you would see a dot. The females have really thick veins and there's no dot. And they say that that dot is a pheromone marker. And I'm trying to see if it's going to let me see, like you can kind of see on this picture that there's the dot. And but yeah, it's that little indicator, the thin veins and the dot, that make it a male, and the females have a much fatter vein going through their body, through their wings.
Thank you. Okay, well, I guess we should wrap it up. I would love to keep talking about this forever, but maybe that's not the way the audience feels, so we should let everybody go.
Yeah,
maybe we need monarchs
you're welcome to you're welcome to send me an email through betinaslittlefarm.com. You know, reach out to me if you have more questions. I'm happy to answer them at a later date.
And when we post the recording, we'll also post some resources to go with it too. So sort of like what your slide was. So, and the Xerxes Society does need volunteers. So check out their website too. I'm working with them right now on a bumblebee survey. So.
Yeah, great.
Also, if you do upload that iNaturalist app on your phone, be sure to look up the Project Monarch Milkweed Mapper. And then you can plug in where you're seeing milkweed, where you're seeing monarchs, and that will help them, understand where things are and where they need to improve or help or get legislation to protect, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. So iNaturalist, Monarch Milkweed Mapper.
Okay.
Excellent. I'm going to go do that tonight, Betina. So thank you for that wonderful suggestion, and for all the wonderful suggestions about the ways that we can help. I will tell our attendees, I've been out on the trails. There are monarchs floating by me as I'm hiking. So if you haven't been out there lately, get out there. You'll have an opportunity to see them, I am very sure. I want to do one last huge big thank you to Betina. You were wonderful. We really do appreciate your insights and sharing your own personal journey through this process with the monarchs. And it's really a beautiful, wonderful creature. And I hope that we can all do our part to do more. We want you to stay very active with the Conejo Open Space, Betina. So don't be a stranger, and make sure that you're working with us all the time. We were always open to some fun ideas and suggestions. Right. And thank you for leading us through the Q&A. We appreciate it. It was a wonderful dialogue. And to all of our attendees, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for being the great advocates that you are. Get out there, hike, mountain bike, ride your horses, and enjoy our beautiful Conejo Valley. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely night.
Bye, everybody.